In this course on premarital counseling, we're going to try to accomplish a couple of different things all at the same time. What I want to do is to equip pastors, lay leaders, youth pastors for being able to do premarital counseling with couples that come in for this purpose. But I also want to invite you to perhaps use some parts of these videos to provide education or counseling for the couples or for youth and young adults in your church. So there may be some sections of these that you feel like you can use directly with the people that are involved. The third thing that I'm hoping is that it will provide you with some information that can be used for pulpit ministry, so that this is information that can be disseminated throughout the entire congregation in your churches. So our prayer and our hope is that we're able to accomplish all three of these things in this course. So some of the lessons are addressed to pastors and ministers specifically. Some of them are done as though talking to young adults or to young couples who are seeking to get married. So if you choose to, then you can share this information with your congregation or with young adults. So we're hoping that you'll be able to train and to share throughout this course. While you're listening to the material, I want you to think about it in the following way. When we do premarital counseling, typically it is done over a period of time. And you may want to schedule perhaps 10 one-hour sessions to go over the materials with the couple, or you may want to have 5 two-hour sessions. You can break them up in a way that works for you and that works for the young couple. But there are going to be 10 different topics that we are going to cover throughout this course. So let's talk a little bit about what those are. We're going to talk about pacing in relationships, about knowing, trusting, relying, committing, and touching. We're going to talk about stages of romantic love and ways to get to know a potential partner. We're going to talk about compatibility in relationships. We're going to talk about forming healthy habits, identifying personality traits, solving disagreements, how to apologize, how to make sure that you're being forgiven, and being forgiving with your partner. We'll talk about household responsibilities and finances, spirituality issues, sexual fulfillment, and then dealing with extended family and perhaps children that are coming into a relationship. So as you're listening to the courses, I want you to think about dividing this up and handling these topics one at a time with the young people that come in, or perhaps 2 at a time, and scheduling time to help them work through these issues. Again, I encourage that you begin this process months before a wedding is going to take place, so that couples have a chance to begin to work on skills that they need and develop things, address things that they might need in their relationship. Areas that can be topics for discussion with youth and young people are going to be some of the same things: pacing relationships, understanding how not to get too involved too quickly in relationships, how not to get stuck in a bad relationship, how to really get to know someone that you're interested in, how families affect the way people do relationships, finding a compatible life partner, how to solve problems and conflicts in relationships, changing roles in families, managing money wisely. This is so important for young people to learn before they come to the place of getting married, and sexual purity and relationships. So these are things that can be addressed as sermon topics or maybe on individual coaching levels with young people and adults in your church. So I'm so excited for you to have this material in the course. I'm excited about the things that you're going to be able to impart to those whose God has entrusted into your care. Hello, my name is Kathy Barton, and I'm your instructor for this course on premarital counseling. I'd like to start with a story. There was a young girl who was a member of a church, grew up in this church. She had been in the church from her childhood, was active in the church, loved God, and grew up into a lovely young lady. And there was a young man who started coming to the church. And he didn't have a Christian background, but he got into the church and started becoming active. And the two of them met, and they fell in love, and they got married. And what happened was, about a year down the road, this young girl came to her pastor and said, "Pastor, things are terrible at home. My husband, he's gone back to all of his old ways. He acts like he did when he was a heathen. He's been drinking more. He goes out with his buddies and has a lot to drink. And the other night he came home and hit me when he was in a drunken rage. And I just don't know what to do. I'm married to this man now, Pastor. What am I supposed to do?" This kind of a scenario is not all that uncommon. Plus, a myriad of other problems that happen in relationships after they start, after the marriage happens. And this course is designed to help pastors, to help youth pastors, to help ministers, counselors, to figure out what are some of the things that they can do to prevent this kind of a tragedy from happening in their own congregations, to help equip people to make better relationship choices, and to help prevent someone from ending up in a disaster and ending up in a divorce. This course is going to talk about issues that people need to be aware of before they're getting married. And I would encourage you to make this a part of your church's teaching ministry, to make it a part of the youth curriculum. So from the time that young men and young women are beginning to discover the opposite sex and have thoughts about dating and opposite sex relationships, that they've already been hearing information that will help them make good choices, and they'll be hearing information that will help them be a good marriage partner for someone that they eventually end up in that kind of a relationship with. So let's get started. Let's talk about what we can do to create strong marriages in our churches, strong marriages in our community, because we all know as ministers that this is a foundation of a healthy church, is having healthy marriages and healthy families. So, you're a minister, and a young couple comes to you and says, "We want to get married." The first question that you should ask as a minister is, "Why do you want to get married?" And people will say, "Oh, we're in love." And then one of your eyebrows should probably shoot up, and you look at them and say, "Well, let's talk about some other things that are much more important." First of all, what do you mean by love? There are different words for love. In the Old Testament, in Hebrew, there were many different words for love. In the Greek New Testament, there are 4, and we're going to talk about those just to begin with. In English, there is one word for love. I don't know how many there are in other languages, but I do know that we only have one word for love. And we say, "I love steak. I love my husband. I love my children. I love going to school." And all of those can't mean the same thing under different circumstances. Well, in Greek, they had 4 words for love. The first word for love was agape. And that word was used specifically to talk about God's love for us. God loving us, considering us valuable and precious and worth coming and dying for. It's a love that isn't based on the quality of the person that's receiving it. It's a love that's based on the character of the one that's giving the love. Agape is the way God loves. And it's based on God's character and God's nature and just who he is. The Bible says that God is love. And it's a selfless love. It's a giving love. The second type of love is called phileo. And it's a friendship kind of love. It's a love that's based on two people's ability to mutually enjoy each other. Friends have this kind of love between them. And certainly, in a married couple, you want them to have a foundation of friendship in their relationship. But this isn't the most important thing. The selfless giving love, that's the God kind of love, is a very, very important component. But the phileo love is a love that says, I enjoy being with you. I have a good time when we're together. But if we're looking at happy relationships in a world that is full of deceived, fallen people, we're not going to get a really good idea of what God wants our love for each other to look like. Like I said, it's important to have some basis of friendship in a relationship, but it's not good enough in itself. A third kind of love is called storge, and that love denotes affection. So if I go and pet my dog, or I hug a baby that I don't know, that love is storge. It might be a pat on the shoulder, some expression of affection. This is also an important component in a relationship because we want to be able to express love to each other. We want to be able to be kindly affectionate towards each other. We're instructed to do that in the Word of God, but that in itself is not enough. The fourth kind of love is eros, and that is the sexual expression of love. And God designed that to be between a husband and a wife. But we can also think about that in terms of the tremendous attraction and the tingly feelings that happen when you see somebody of the opposite sex that you feel extremely attracted to. That's an eros kind of love. It's almost a physical response to the attractiveness of another person, and it makes you want to be with them. So when a couple says, we just love each other, you want to talk to them about these different kinds of love. What is their connection to each other? Is it a connection that's based on that feeling of attraction? And it was love at first sight, and we just saw each other, and we've been with each other every minute ever since. Do they have other expressions of love in their relationship? And if they don't, they need to be educated about the fact that there are many other components that are necessary for a successful relationship. The reason for this is because romantic love has two stages. There's that initial stage where people are filled with this sense of extreme happiness, and they can't think of anything else but that person that they want to be with all the time. And they could spend all their time and all their energy with each other. It makes concentrating on other things more difficult. This stage can last for up to 2 years. And it's probably a good thing because if it lasted endlessly, none of us would ever get anything done if we had those feelings of love because we would be focused on just one thing. And there are other things in life that we have to handle. There are practical day-to-day things that we have to deal with. We have to take care of a house. We have to take care of working jobs and going to school and doing other things. But the patterns that are established early in that relationship, it's kind of interesting. I hear a lot of stories about young people who will sit and talk until 2 o'clock in the morning with their new love interest, and they go out of their way to be nice and kind. They're on their very best behavior. And a lot of couples don't understand that this isn't real life, and in a lot of ways, this isn't real love. That sense of initial attraction is not going to last forever. And unless a couple is building things into their relationship that are good, strong foundational stones for them to build the rest of that marriage structure on, the marriage is not going to last and it's not going to be successful. Another thing that's important is that we tend to do things when we're in that euphoric stage that aren't really good for the long course of the relationship. There are people who would be always giving, always giving, always giving, because they're in love and they want to make the other person happy. But they don't recognize that the other person is always taking, always taking, always taking. And they set a pattern in the relationship that one person is always making the decisions and one person is always getting what they want, and the other person is not having their needs recognized or addressed at all. But if that's the pattern that's set during that initial stage in the relationship, that is the pattern that is likely to endure through the whole course of the relationship. And we are training prospective partners about the way we want to be treated early on in a relationship. And so most often the pattern is that the man is demanding and the woman acquiesces. And I think that there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some of it is that women are most often taught that it's their job to make the man happy. Women are very relationship oriented, where men tend to be more task oriented. So women think that it's their job to give, and they do it. And they're afraid to make demands on the relationship because they don't want to scare the other person away. They don't want the other person to think that they require too much work or energy. But that's a huge mistake because it creates an imbalance in the relationship that's going to create a lot of unhappiness down the road. Early in a relationship is an excellent time to begin establishing habits that are going to cause the relationship to be successful down the road. So early patterns are important. And this is one of the reasons why I had mentioned earlier that although this is a course on premarital counseling, that many of these principles need to be given to people at a much younger age so that they're developing good habits about the way they interact with the opposite sex and the way they think about even the dating process as they get older. There is kind of a movement in some of the churches in America to do away with the concept of dating and to begin something that they call courting, which actually is an old idea that was done away with during the sexual revolution in America. In a courting relationship, there is an intent of having a serious relationship. It means that some amount of time has been spent learning about the other person and who they are and where they're from. In courting relationships, oftentimes parents and community members were involved in helping select a prospective courting person for you so that it was somebody that fit well in your community, that would fit well with your family. But courting is intentional, deciding to build a relationship, intending for it to be serious and not to be something frivolous and to be tried on like a pair of socks and discarded if it doesn't work out. So having an attitude about protecting your heart, guarding your heart, not giving yourself readily to every different person that comes along during dating relationships is a good thing to teach young people from the time that, like I said, they start being aware of the opposite sex. So, the second stage in a relationship has to do with real life kinds of things. Once all of the honeymoon period of the relationship wears off and it becomes real life, that's when the relationship takes a tremendous amount of work. And if there were healthy patterns set and good patterns set in the initial stages, they're easier to carry over into the second stage where the relationship is going to be for the rest of the course until death do we part, hopefully, with relationships. A lot of work is required for a relationship to be successful. And most young couples don't know this. They think that their relationship will just be successful because they love each other. They think that things will just work themselves out. And so they're not able to make decisions on purpose that will take them in a positive direction, that will create a strong and lasting union and a strong and loving union in a marriage relationship. So, lots and lots of work. Marriage for romantic love is actually a fairly new idea. Didn't really start until around the 1940s. Prior to that, romance wasn't even in the equation. Certainly, some people would think somebody else was attractive, but young couples often weren't even allowed to choose who their mate was going to be. That decision was made by the parents and other people in the community. They may have had something to say about it, but it was a joint decision, and they were expected to enter into this relationship and to make it work. So, romance, that's something new. Marriage has been around much longer than romance has. And there are things that we can do to create romance in a relationship. There are things that we can do to create that loving atmosphere in a relationship. And so we're going to talk throughout this course about a number of different areas where that can happen. So, marriages used to be seen as not just benefiting two individuals. Marriages were seen as benefiting both families of the people that were getting married, benefiting the neighborhood and the community in which they lived. It's become a very selfish and self-centered and all about me and getting my needs met kind of thing. And that hasn't produced good results. Marriage ends in divorce 50% of the time in the United States. And that's for first marriages. And the numbers get worse in second marriages and third marriages. We want our marriages to be successful. We want our families to be intact. We want our families to be happy. We want the joy that's shared between a husband and wife to be reflective of the relationship between Christ and the church. This is a tremendous opportunity for churches to demonstrate how they're different from the world. And unfortunately, what I see a lot of in my counseling practice is that marriages in the churches don't really look a whole lot different than marriages in the world. The divorce rate isn't lower. The level of happiness in relationships isn't higher, and it should be. Christ being present in our relationships should make a difference. We should be able to see that in our marriages. So we want to equip you to help see that happen more and more in your churches. So, what are things that people need to look at? I want to kind of introduce some of the ideas that we're talking about, and I want to talk about Ella and Eric. And they're a couple that I have been working with. And I want to talk about different areas that we need to look at in the relationship and where Ella and Eric succeeded and where they failed. The first area that people tend to look at is intellectual things. You know, do they have some kind of intellectual dialogue? Are they able to talk about things that interest them? Do they have similar things that do interest them and that don't? Well, with Ella and Eric, they were both well-educated people. They both had college degrees. They were both pretty intelligent people. They had some things in common that they enjoyed. So they got to know each other fairly well in this area, and it gave them a basis for wanting to move forward in their relationship. Another area to look at is emotional control. Different people regulate themselves differently. Some people are very good at managing their emotions, and some people don't do it well at all. And Ella really didn't know Eric very well in this area before she got into a serious relationship with him. And then she ended up married to someone who would have horrible temper outbursts, and he had begun to start pushing her around. She hadn't seen him angry during the time that they were dating. Their dates were all, happy, festive kinds of things. They didn't have variety in the experiences as they had. So Ella really didn't have a chance to see what happened when Eric got angry. And when she found out, it was a very unhappy surprise to her. The other thing that people see sometimes is a bit of hysteria. And that's what Eric learned about Ella. Ella was a calm and happy person when they were dating, but after they were married, he found out that she was a rather hysterical female. And little things would set her off, and she would react with such intensity that completely confused him. She would become sobbing and hysterical over some small matter. That was very mysterious to him. But they hadn't had enough dating experience in a variety of different areas to identify that his lack of control and her lack of control both were contributing to huge problems in their relationship just a year later. Social interests is another area to look. There are people that we surround ourselves with, our friends, and you can really learn a lot about a person by the kind of friends they keep. If they have a lot of friends that are really intellectual and studious, it means that those are the things they value. If their friends are loud and violent and drink a lot, then chances are that those are the kinds of behaviors that you're likely to see from your spouse down the road, because we spend time with people that we have similarities to. When they were dating, Ella and Eric did a lot of fun things together, but Eric was really interested in football, and he actually coached a football team with his brother. So all of his social activities tended to be around sports. And when they were dating, Ella went along with that because she just wanted to be with Eric. But she didn't pay attention to the fact that he didn't have a lot of other social things that he liked to do. And she didn't put much pressure on the relationship to explore some other things. And so she found out that being a football wife was not really what she wanted to do. She didn't want to spend all of her time out at the bar and drinking after football games. And she would become upset because he would have too much to drink. She came from a family where there wasn't any drinking. And so being around alcohol all of a sudden was a pretty awful experience for her, especially when the more he drank, the more badly Eric would behave. And then Eric's brother would drink with him. Eric's sister would drink with him. In fact, Eric's sister could drink both of the boys under the table. She was probably an alcoholic. And Ella didn't notice those kinds of things, or she didn't attend to the kinds of social relationships that Eric had and the kinds of social activities that he tended to do. So all of this were pieces of information that she could have been using to make evaluations about the relationship early on before she was committed to the relationship. Social things are very important things to look at. Another area that we need to look at are common values. This is another area where Eric and Ella had very strong differences. Ella came from a very religious family. They attended church. She was Catholic, and so she would go to the Catholic church services. She would go to confession, and so she started pressuring Eric to follow the spiritual practices that she was accustomed to. And he was more of a free spirit kind of person. He's like, I know God and I love God, but I don't want to have to go to confession every week. And he was angry that she wanted to make him. So there were very different values in what was important. There were also very different values in what was acceptable and not. In Ella's family, drinking wasn't something that was acceptable. In Eric's family, everybody drank. In Ella's family, they were more conservative, and they had different, stricter boundaries in terms of what was acceptable behavior and what was not. Where in Eric's family, things were looser. So couples need to look and see what their work ethics are. That was one area where Eric and Ella were similar. They both were very dedicated to the work. However, if coaching football interfered with work, guess what won out with Eric? It was football. And that was disturbing to Ella. They weren't on the same page in terms of work ethic. So families have different values. And when we're seeing young people, we need to encourage them to look in these different areas. Spiritual values are immensely important. The Bible's very clear about us not being unequally yoked together with unbelievers. And there are some people who think that evangelism dating is a great idea. They think that they'll find somebody that they like, that they're interested in, that is an unbeliever, but they think that if the person likes me, then they'll come to church with me. If the person really likes me, then they'll come and maybe they'll get saved, and that's a way to get people into the church. That's not usually a plan that works out well. That's something that usually ends in disaster. It's something that should be discouraged. Certainly, for young people, having them invite their friends to church is a wonderful idea. Having them date them to get them there, not so much. So we want to make sure that we're looking at a lot of different areas. Young people who are dating need to ask 1,000 questions of the person that they're going out with. And it might be a good idea to help them come up with some of those kinds of questions. They need to know where the person came from. They need to know a lot about their family. They need to know about how they related to their mom, how they related to their dad. Were they even present? Was one of their parents, had they lost one to death? Had they lost contact with one through divorce? Do they get along with one parent better than the other? How do they get along with their siblings? They need to look at people that they socialize with. They need to ask them questions about work. They need to ask questions about school. And they need to expose themselves to a lot of different circumstances so that it's not, you find like with couples who maybe meet at school. There's a term that we use, childhood sweethearts. People who met in school and they grew up together and they went through school together, but all of their relating was in a school environment. So they may not have seen the other person's home and family life and been exposed to that. They may not have seen where they go to church or what their spiritual life is like. So we need to have a lot of different experiences that we can draw on to begin to collect information. And we're going to talk more in the upcoming sessions. We have about 10 different areas that we're going to look at where you need to have information and how to get this information. And we're also going to talk a lot about how to keep the relationship moving at a slow enough pace that you can find out things that you need to know before you're already emotionally involved in the relationship. Because the more quickly we become involved, the more likely we are to make poor decisions, because we're making decisions with our emotions instead of using our rational abilities. We're not using our heads, we're using our hearts. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time and give you quite a bit of information about all of these different areas in the upcoming classes. And my desire is that once we're done, that you will have a comprehensive approach to knowing what information young people and young couples need to have so that they can move themselves more towards healthy relating in their relationships. They can identify problem areas and begin to fix them early enough in the relationship that they have a better chance of success. And you can pattern things with young people so that they're making good decisions and they're looking out for each other. I know that teenagers tend to listen more to other teens than they do to pastors, to ministers, to counselors, to parents even. So creating a peer group in the church where young people will help keep each other accountable to make sound decisions, to guard their hearts, and to equip themselves to find a good marriage partner and to be a good marriage partner. I'm really trusting that you'll have the tools necessary to be able to do all of those things, and we'll cover them in the upcoming lessons.